Chapter 46. Get them! Go, go, go! The camp burst to life as Little John gave the signal that the sheriff and his men were near. The archers rose from behind their boulders, releasing their arrows, while high above the trees, others readied their buckets of acorns. And now disguised Marion glanced over at Cluck, grinning nervously as she held on to one side of a thick rope, and her lady-in-waiting, who was dressed as one of the merry men, held the other. This was it. Were they ready? The rhino soldiers charged down the hill. The trees rained acorns, pelting the rhinos' heads. They cried out in alarm, stumbling over the tiny seeds. When they plundered past Marion and Cluck, the two lifted their rope, tripping the soldiers and sending them careening to the ground. Marion shot Cluck a grin, then dropped the rope and ran towards the barrels of mud they'd gathered from the river. With the help of Otto, they started throwing wads of mud at the soldiers' faces as they tried to scramble to their feet. The rhinos bellowed in a mixture of rage and frustration, blindly stumbling towards the river to get the mud out of their eyes. But when they arrived, Much and Alan Adeo were ready for them, kicking each of them into the water in turn. The lively current scooped them up, dragging them downstream as they screamed and flailed with frustration. Marion couldn't help giggling at the scene. But then she turned back to the battle just in time to find a large armored rhino storming in her direction, wielding a sharp-looking sword. He was at least double her size and had muscles bulging out from his armor. Frightened, she tried to back away, but only managed to trip over a bucket of berries and fall to the ground. She squeaked in alarm as she looked up to find the rhino looming above her, his sword raised and ready, fear pounding in her heart as her mind raced and a terrifying reality sank in. Was this it? After everything she'd been through, would he just mercilessly cut her down where she lay? She looked desperately for Cluck or Robin or anyone else, but they were all busy fighting their own battles, and she had no weapon of her own. She wondered if she could manage to jump on him and scratch him with her claws, hard enough to do some damage at least, before he struck his fatal blow. But to her surprise, before she could make a move, the rhino lifted his helmet. Marion's eyes bulged from her head as she realized who it was. Joffrey winked at her, then pulled the helmet back over his face and turned his back as if he'd never seen her. "We're outnumbered," he cried loudly. "They've got an entire army, and there's ghosts too," he added, waving his arms in the air as if he were petrified. "Retreat! As your captain, I demand you retreat, before it's too late." He began running through the thick of the battle. The remaining rhinos looked up to watch, then to Marion's delight, began stumbling in his direction, trying to get away. The sheriff stepped in, stopping Joffrey in his tracks. "Stand your ground, you idiot," he scolded him. "Don't you see they're just using silly tricks? You have swords, cut them down." But he might as well have saved his breath. His soldiers, what was left of them, kept following Joffrey, running in the other direction, away from the camp. One smaller rhino did try to turn around and fight, but was quickly cut up by Cluck, who pointed her sword at his belly. "You want some of this?" she asked sweetly. "If not, I suggest you run." He quickly took her suggestion and did just that. Now the only one who remained was the sheriff. He bellowed in rage, waving his sword in the air. "Cowards!" he cried. "You're all a bunch of cowards!" He stopped short, realizing he was surrounded. The merry men circled him, swords and clubs raised, menacing looks on their faces. The sheriff's scowl seemed to fall off his face, replaced by a look of pure fear. Now, boys," he said, holding up his paws. "I'm only here for Robin. The rest of you can go free. I'm sure the prince would pardon you if you would just give up the fox." "Not a chance," growled Otto, holding up his sword. "We'd sooner lose our lives than turn in our friend," Much blustered. "Something you wouldn't understand. Since I'm guessing you don't have any friends, added Will Scarlet. The sheriff looked hurt by this. Then his expression morphed into anger again. You stupid animals, he cried. You're going to pay for this. You're all going to pay for this. And with that, he pushed his way out of the circle, stumping in the other direction. Little John raised his sword, ready to chase after him, but Robin laid a paw on his arm. No, he said. Let him go home and look Prince John in the face and tell him he failed again. He shot a grin at Marian. I want everyone to know that once again his royal phoniness has been outfoxed.